All right, it's all downhill from here. So I am joined with two belligerent drunks and the orange Gigi. We're going to be getting into Nobody Understands Bitcoin, which was an article written by Jameson Lopp in 2017. If you've not read it, I strongly recommend it. It's a brilliant article. So to kick things off, HODL, do you understand Bitcoin?
No.
Expand.
That's obvious.
I need more from you than that.
No, nobody understands Bitcoin, and I think throughout my years here, I said this in my keynote this morning, I've been directionally correct on Bitcoin, luckily, but I've been wrong about all sorts of things in Bitcoin. If you would have talked to me in 2014, I would have given you a bunch of stuff from Andreas Antonopoulos videos that were about Bitcoin taking down Visa, bro, and we're going to be like MasterCard times a billion, and things that don't sound that reasonable or intelligent to say today. And there's a million examples of that throughout my time. I even once, this is embarrassing to admit, but I'll admit it, I once ran Bitcoin XT, and I posted a caption that said, "On the right side of history."
You should explain this, because we've got a lot of new people in here, so explain Bitcoin XT.
Well, at the time, Bitcoin XT was backed by Brian Armstrong. It was during the block size war, and it had this idea that it was going to be we were going to have dynamic block sizes, and let the free market set the block size. And I was pretty noobish in 2015 or 16 when this software released, and I was like, oh yeah, of course, free market, all the things, bro. That makes total sense to me. That was a really naive and stupid opinion. I look back on that opinion now, and I'm just like, yeah, what was I thinking? And there's a million, my whole career in Bitcoin has been me looking back, basically saying to myself, what the hell was I thinking? That's not accurate at all to how Bitcoin works or functions.
It is like an organism in a lot of ways, but that's also a completely insane thing I just said. So this is what happens is people make these mental models, like saying it's an organism, or there was one, somebody said the blockchain is a city. No, it's not. But if that helps you wrap your head around what is happening, all power to you. And there's a whole bunch of these, right? You got the, and part of the reason we have so many analogies and creative ways of describing what it is because it's really hard to really grasp what it is, and then debate about what it should be. I tell you, I talk to a lot of institutional investors. One of the things they want to know is, how do we value it? It's like, they're like, oh, it has no cash flows. So, and I'm like, yeah, well, it's not a company. So, don't be surprised. They're like, give me these features of an asset that they see. They're like, it looks kind of like a gold, but like it's more, I'm like, yeah, it looks kind of like that. It does, but it's not that. And I tell them, I'm like, they're like, it's just so hard for us to wrap our heads around how we should think about it. And I'm like, that's okay. It's 15 years old. Like, you don't have to know. I don't think people had complex, valuation models for gold in the year 2000 BCE, right? It is. And so, but look, whatever you got to do to wrap your mind around it. But I would also say keep an open mind, because to HODL's point, it changes.
Well, I know what it is not. It's not digital energy. It's not digital real estate. It's not all of these weird examples or stories that we make up. I think it's not even only money, which is weird, because we've been seeing that in the last year or so with all the Ordinals craze, and there's a lot, there's the most fundamental debate that we can have is Bitcoin money only, or is it also data storage? Is it only software? Is it cultural? Is it, historical? Is it economical? There are so many angles from which you can try to understand this thing. I think it feels like the only thing that is for sure is that it's an evolving thing that changes all the time.
Right.
And no one at any point, not even Satoshi, all the mistakes that Satoshi made in the beginning also point towards, the guy who put the people who put the most energy into thinking this thing up didn't know, most basic fundamental errors in the white paper, such as taking the longest chain instead of the heaviest chain, right? It's something that, if you would have review and people look at it, they would probably point it out very early and say, like, this is flawed. Like, this would kill Bitcoin. You cannot just take the longest chain. I can make up blocks as fast as I want and then take over the entire chain. So even the creator of Bitcoin didn't really understand all parts of it. And over the years, we figured that we can do so many more things with Bitcoin that we didn't think were possible. One of these things is to put cat pictures and dick butts onto the most valuable digital monument in human history.
Innovation.
But here we are.
We're going to get into that, but you kind of touched on a topic that's very, I guess, hotly debated right now, which is ossification. Will Bitcoin always change?
To believe that Bitcoin will stop changing, I think, is a fallacy, and it means that Bitcoin will die. Because one thing that I can also be almost sure to say is Bitcoin is software, and software never stops to evolve, because the underlying hardware, which we run software on, also changes. This is not only the only reason, but this is reason alone to be changing Bitcoin all the time. Now, when we say Bitcoin changes, we can mean two different things, which is one, the software implementation, making sure that everything just runs. It's an engine that needs to be kept maintained and oiled. The other thing is consensus changes, changing the rules of Bitcoin itself. And there, even if we think that we have it, I can assure you, even if we said, let's ossify Bitcoin, let's not change it anymore because it's perfect money, which it isn't, nothing is perfect. Even in that case, the moment someone finds a security vulnerability with the system, and it's almost theoretically assured that there is still a security vulnerability in there, then within a couple days or minutes, we will have consensus for the next change. So things, even our strongest convictions, can change very, very fast.
So Alex, do you think the ossification argument is basically just like finance bros versus devs?
It's so interesting because you hear it from people who do understand Bitcoin technology sometimes, but you also hear it a lot from investor types. And I think in that sense, they don't really know what they mean. To Calle's point, like an open source project always needs maintenance at a minimum, right? But some investors may say, they say Bitcoin is digital gold, but it should only be digital gold, right? It's a normative qualitative statement. It's not analysis, right? Because we can prove that, well, it literally hasn't ever only been digital gold. It's always been plenty of other interesting things. I mean, people were putting NFTs on Bitcoin in 2013, right? Like it's an open system. So you do hear it, and I think some of that is because it's, well, like I said, it's a lot easier. You need these, we use these all day, heuristics, these mental shortcuts to help us understand the world, right? And one of the ones that's the easiest and most prominent that people say is that Bitcoin is digital gold. Well, a lot of people have known about and used gold for thousands of years. So now you tell me there's a digital version, like it feels like you just, took a shortcut to understanding what it is. But that isn't all that it is. It isn't. It's never only been that, and it almost certainly won't only be that. I think it's a decent analogy, and so I think from the investment side, people, if you start telling them it's like all these other possibilities, or it's this complex system that could be one way or another, it's like, okay, well, like, what do you mean? How do I deal with that? So I think there's a simplicity to something like the idea that it already is digital gold. It has succeeded. Quote unquote, it's finished. Let's ossify. I think that is appealing because the digital gold narrative is so effective and appealing. They don't want to have to start saying that, well, it's digital gold and it's a platform for layer 2 roll-up like settlement transactions. Like what?
I mean, I think that really the conversation is about premature ossification, because I think everybody knows and believes that Bitcoin must ossify at some point in the future. Or at least that's a strong sense that many of us have, but we don't know when that point is, and a lot of the upgrades along the path are potentially poison pills where it could actually harm Bitcoin significantly. And so that means that every upgrade that we get has to be vetted with extreme scrutiny. And to Alex's point, I think a lot of the premature ossification, especially coming out of the camps of people who have large amounts of money now suddenly invested into this thing, it reeks to me of a fear reaction. And I don't think these are people who have a strong they just don't have a strong basis for some of maybe the things that they believe about Bitcoin. They have a fixed worldview on Bitcoin and not a dynamic and evolving worldview, which is what you need to have in order to, go the distance with Bitcoin.
So I probably want to leave like the ossification thing behind here, but just before we do, HODL said that he thinks everyone agrees that ossification is inevitable at some point. Do you agree with that, Calle?
I think Bitcoin will grow to a point where it will ossify whether we like it or not in some sense, because it's going to be very, very hard to push a change into Bitcoin because we need just global consensus for that. And I believe, as I said before, the way to get global consensus once you include more and more people, which is kind of the goal of Bitcoin, is it's going to slow things down. We already see that. Changes in Bitcoin in 2013, 2012, 11, when Satoshi found a bug, it was fixed in a couple of days. And everyone was just like, hey guys, update your software, and it was done. And those times are over for sure. So I think Bitcoin will ossify whether we like it or not, which also feels like it's a race against time. Some changes in Bitcoin still feel necessary to me. One of the things that I would like to see, for example, is better privacy in Bitcoin. And those would require, hard forks or soft forks. And now, as the user base of Bitcoin grows and as more and more interests are imported into the Bitcoin system, especially from large financial institutions who might just, they don't care about privacy. Like, why would I support privacy? This is perfect. It's a perfect asset. The value grows all the time. The one thing that people don't understand, I think, especially who started putting in a lot of money into Bitcoin later, is that the reason why we got there is because we made it useful. If you have 21 million of something that is useless, I'm not sure if people will really value it. So the reason why we're here, where we are, is because a lot of work has gone into making sure I can actually pay with it, I can use it, I can safely secure it, and so on and so forth, which all, needed some changes along the way.
All right, so the idea of this panel was to try and trigger as many of you as possible. So hopefully no one will leave here untriggered. So we'll get into like ordinals and shitcoins on Bitcoin, but as we're sat with Calle, who works on an eCash solution called Cashew, is eCash a shitcoin?
Yes. eCash was invented as a shitcoin because it was invented for fiat, and you have couple of eCash projects today out there who literally just, market themselves as a shitcoin. It's called, cashew nut token or something, which value will increase over time. So this could exist, but the way, joke aside, the way we're building it today is purely to make Bitcoin applications better. So we're representing Bitcoin amounts with eCash, and obviously that doesn't fall into the shitcoin realm because no one needs to think, the value doesn't increase and so on and so forth. So jokingly, yes, but today, not anymore, I would say.
Okay, Calle says eCash is a shitcoin. So I want to get into ordinals, and I don't even know where to start. I'm kind of, in some ways, sick of the conversation, but I feel like it's relevant to this panel. So I reckon, HODL, let's start with you and go down the line. And what's your take on ordinals? And by that, I mean like ordinals, inscriptions, BRC20, like blanket term.
Yeah, I think ordinals are a behavior in Bitcoin that are fully within consensus. And if you don't like them, you kind of have to break consensus in order to get rid of them, which is, to me, a scary proposition as somebody who's been through periods where consensus was less fixed. And so I get reluctant, even though I don't personally love ordinals myself, I don't participate in that market, I get reluctant when people start talking about sort of extreme measures to counter what is effectively only a perceived problem. Maybe it grows to become a real problem. And I could see instances where it's a regulatory attack surface, but at a technical level, in my opinion, it's not an issue today.
Yeah, I think I honestly have a serious take, a similar take as HODL here, which is, honestly, I'm mostly ambivalent, I would say. Again, I do believe that Bitcoin has, it is and has a potential to be the world's best and soundest and credibly neutral money. And if anything threatens its chances of being that, then I would be opposed to it. I don't think today this activity does really any damage, frankly, to Bitcoin, in my opinion. So I just don't really care. Broadly, I will say I don't believe that ordinals exist. There is no such thing as ordinal theory. So there are not individual Satoshis. I absolutely do not believe they exist. If you want to get it with a group of people and say you're going to index Bitcoin's UTXO set and look at it a certain way, that's fine by me. I really don't care.
I think ordinals are a litmus test for people to figure out whether someone understands what consensus means or not. Because ordinals, as you said, are fully in consensus. And I think, theoretically speaking, you couldn't even turn them off in any way. You would have to cripple Bitcoin to a point where it's completely useless. You wouldn't be able to do multisig, for example, anymore. If you really want to get rid of everything that you can do, like all the other things you can do in Bitcoin, just except for paying one person from one person to another, you would have to turn off almost all of its features. Because some way or another, someone will find a way to put a dick butt into Bitcoin. In a multisig, in a time lock, or there are so many different ways of doing that. So for me, ordinals feels like it is, it's a personal test to someone, whether they can truly accept what Bitcoin is, which, what Bitcoin is truly a set of rules that we all agreed on when we ran the software. And if you don't want to agree on these rules, then you run different software. That's the only thing that you can do, and that's the only thing that you should be able to do.
I would just add that, as a researcher who studies this market, I find it super interesting. I don't personally, like I said, care very much, but there's a pretty big market that's emerged, frankly, at this point. And my team and I wrote a report about inscriptions and ordinals in February of last year, less than 2 months after Casey Rodarmore launched this software, Ord. And we were like, this is going to be big. I don't know if people like to hear that, but we're like, we did some work to come up with this, but we said that the cumulative value of inscriptions, and at the point we meant only like JPEGs, like NFTs. Now they're doing tokens, really stupidly designed token schemas and stuff, but whatever. We said it would be worth $5 billion, that market, in 2 years, and I think it's basically already there, which is wild. So from a pure analytical standpoint, I find it super interesting. There's a bunch of, and I would say the ordinals people, they have to self-custody. They use hardware wallets. A lot of them run nodes. That's interesting to me.
So HODL, do you give any credence to the fix the filters argument at all?
No, I don't give any credence to it. It's not something I'm interested in, and I don't think it's going to work.
I agree. It has no chance of working. And it has some pretty big negative externalities as well.
The only way to get rid of them is to break Bitcoin.
All right. So ETFs, we've got an ETF, or someone who represents an ETF issuer here. So let's start with you, Alex. Do ETFs pose a realistic threat to Bitcoin?
This is a great question, and I would say possibly. And just to clarify, we're the partner to Invesco. So it's actually Invesco that's the issuer. We're the sub-advisor. But it is called the Invesco Galaxy Bitcoin ETF, one of the 11 now that they have in the U.S. Theoretically, it could. I think one of the things to push, and when it comes to that, I personally think if Bitcoin's going to be globally adopted as money or as digital gold or in any way, money, there's infinite forms of money, right? The dollars that I have on my PayPal are not the same as the dollars that I have in my bank. All of these having dollars in a bank, by the way, is actually you got to put a big fat asterisk next to that statement. They don't actually have your dollars in the bank, to be clear, or your euros or your pounds. There's no money in those banks, just FYI. But it's everywhere, right? It's all different forms of the same asset. And in that way, I think I want Bitcoin available in my bank account, my brokerage account, my savings account, my phone, my house, under my bed. Theoretically, I think we end up seeing forms of Bitcoin everywhere, and so there's an inevitability to it. Otherwise, I think in many ways they're incredibly positive for Bitcoin. I think the Bitcoin network and the individual units of BTC become more useful when they're worth more, in my opinion. But we don't want a giant pile of, Greg Maxwell had a great answer to a question on Reddit, I think at this point, 7 years ago. Somebody said, what's the biggest threat to Bitcoin? Is it a 51% attack? And his answer, I'm truncating it, of course, by memory, but was basically like, no, the biggest threat to Bitcoin is ignorance and apathy. That waves of new entrants will come in and have no understanding and knowledge of the properties that make Bitcoin so valuable, right? It's not just that it becomes more valuable in an exchange rate with depreciating fiat currency. It's valuable because it's credible, it's neutral, it's transparent, it's censorship resistant, right? Like, and if you don't know that, then they may, the economic majority can basically determine what Bitcoin is, which version of software we want to agree. And if so, you have a pile of people who don't know, don't care. There's always a risk that there could be, they could force through changes or tell the whole world now that Bitcoin as we know, it's actually like Bitcoin Classic. And now like there's a new version of Bitcoin so there is always that risk, but I would say Bitcoiners succeed when they educate rather than keep the BlackRocks and Fidelities out of that conversation. Just got to bring them in and make sure they understand what makes Bitcoin truly useful and valuable. And so far I think they do.
So do you see the biggest threat from ETFs then as like the sort of social attack on Bitcoin? As in their influence within the Bitcoin space becomes too large?
Sorry, say that again. That's a little harder here.
Do you think the biggest threat to Bitcoin through the ETFs is from the influence that the ETFs will have over?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, and I think there is they could influence. They could buy their own developers, fund their own development. They could favor versions of Bitcoin that have. Literally, they could favor forks of Bitcoin over the existing consensus. Right? When you massively expand the pool of Bitcoiners. We've got to continue to pass down this oral tradition of why Bitcoin is important, right? It's not obvious, like we said, nobody understands it anyway. And so, again, it's about bringing them into the fold. I've been I felt good about, I know the teams at a lot of these places, including ours and Invesco's and Fidelity, BlackRock's, they do, I think, understand a lot about what makes Bitcoin valuable, and rather than keep them out, we should deputize them so they can carry the message forth to these millions of new users, or I should say investors, because you don't actually use Bitcoin if you own the ETF, but that's a different.
Well, I respectfully disagree there because I cannot imagine any future in which we ask BlackRock what to do with Bitcoin next. And some of you might remember what happened in 2017-18 when we had the soft fork war, and Coinbase, who was the largest custodian then and still is the largest custodian today, had a really important voice in that conversation, right? And Coinbase's interest was only for Coinbase's interest. Obviously, it's fine if everyone just thinks about themselves, then Bitcoin still works. That's kind of how it became so popular. But the interests of a large group of people, individuals, can be very different from that of a financial institution.
I agree. We've proven that. We should stay vigilant.
So I'm not sure if that can be fixed or not. It's just the way it is right now. Most of the ETFs park their money at Coinbase, and this is just a central piece of control that can be exerted onto Bitcoin. I was wondering, since we're going down the triggering path, what would happen if the plebs would decide to fork out BlackRock, for example? Theoretically speaking, obviously you cannot take away anyone's Bitcoin, but if you fork them out, you can do that. So there is a theoretical possibility that BlackRock could lose all of its access to all of its Bitcoin if enough people decided that. And so, is that illegal? Is that bad? I don't know. It would follow consensus, and that's the only rule that we have in Bitcoin, right? So I'm not so sure that we can be buddies with the ETFs, because I don't think that they are interested in the same thing that most people are.
We should, let's dig into that a little bit more. So when you say we fork out BlackRock, are you thinking if there was, let's say, a privacy proposal for Bitcoin that Bitcoiners wanted, but BlackRock did not, that they would have to run a different set of code?
Well, that would be a classic fork, right? And we would have two Bitcoins. What I mean is kind of like we could, this is just theory. I don't say that anyone should do that or could do that, but what you could do is just freeze all the assets, basically. We all together could decide to freeze BlackRock's assets. Isn't that fucking crazy? I think that is, and we should know that we have this power, because One day we will need to know that we have this power. It will come again, and we will, we had the UASF, and we won the soft fork wars because of that, because we knew we have the power. It wasn't the economic majority who decided what Bitcoin is today. It was the plebs who decided what Bitcoin is today. And I think we must keep that, and it's going to get harder and harder as these players become bigger and bigger.
HODL, do you have anything to add on the ETF stuff?
No, I just think that anywhere Bitcoin begins to centralize, it should be watched, very closely. And so I think constant vigilance with the ETF providers, and the thing I'm worried about is central banks acting in conjunction with Wall Street to hoover up, a mass amount of Bitcoin, way more than the ETFs can get their hands on. And I think that's probably the next step after where we are here today.
So on the centralization side, there's a few kind of key areas, I guess, where Bitcoin can potentially centralize, miners being one, development being another, and there's others. Is there any major area that you have any concern in?
In terms of Bitcoin centralizing? Yeah, I think mining is a worry because we have now a significant amount of hash power within the US. There's a growing sort of regulatory call within the US to do clean block mining, OFAC compliant mining, et cetera. And mining is one of the most significant choke points that we have in Bitcoin. And so, I think the decentralization of mining is essentially paramount. And, I would like to see miners as spread out across the world as they possibly could be. And I think that the optimistic case there is that energy competition will drive them to other locations. And anytime they get too much regulatory pressure, the miners can just leave the shores. I mean, we saw this happen in 2021 where China did a crackdown on mining and all the miners flew to North America basically overnight. And so we can see that, time and again. But again, it's worrisome, and you got to keep an eye on what's going on with, these choke points we have in Bitcoin.
Just conscious that we're getting low on time. Alex, do you have any last thoughts?
Oh, well, I just wanted to say that, it's been amazing being in Bedford. We were out hard in Bedford last night. It felt like beast mode. Now we're at the Corn Exchange. It's full-blown cheat code. England's pretty weird, I would say. I have trouble charging my phone. I can't drive on these roads. See me on stage dripping wet with these flows. Again, last night at the auction house, we were popping bottles. Did you guys catch Pete driving his Lambo at full throttle? No plan B, no plan G. Forget about your model. You gotta live your best life like American HODL. Actually, you might have to pivot. No divots. Find your balance like ballet. See me spending coins with no ID because I'm private like Calle. And if you're hating on the team, know my mates will always bash you. We're cracking skulls like a nut. That's why my people call me Cashew. Yeah, you see me on the timeline fighting Twitter trolls. Wait, did I miss a whole part about Danny? Wait, hold on. Oh no, I got it. Here it is. All right. Catch me on the timeline fighting Twitter trolls. When I rap, I'm slick off the dome like Danny Knowles. So hand me bowls, plates, and spoons, but no Bitcoin hard forks. Because we're rolling super deep with all my real Bedford dorks. Let's go.
You knew there was going to be a wrap. Let's go. Thank you, everyone.
It's always a full house when Jack Mallers is at a conference. I love this guy. Jack, how are you?
I love you too, Pete. Congratulations. I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Hometown hero. One more time for Peter.
Oh, shut up. All right, let's get spicy. I love Michael Saylor and I love Matt Odell. Should we talk about ossification, Jack? Should we ossify? Should we fund devs?
Yes. I don't know. It's a tough topic because I think there's just a big misunderstanding potentially in. I don't know, I saw a screen grab of the other Jack, my buddy Dorsey, of him ragging on someone for not understanding how Bitcoin works, which may come off as offensive, but I do think that there's maybe a bit of a misunderstanding of FOSS development in Bitcoin and how protocol changes get adopted. But Bitcoin, at least for as long as I've been involved, has always had a healthy open source community. And if we kill it and we cannibalize it, it'd be the first time ever in Bitcoin's history that we would try and run a $1 trillion open source project going on $10 trillion, going on $100 trillion without any developers. That sounds a little risky and nonsensical to me. But I do understand when I scroll through Twitter why some people would maybe be hesitant, why a BlackRock getting involved in funding someone sounds potentially scary, but I think it's a big misunderstanding. I don't know if there's any direction you want to take this in, but I think it's unequivocal, yes, we have to fund devs.
So what is the misunderstanding? Because obviously Michael Saylor has been a force in Bitcoin, but he's also somebody who holds a lot of Bitcoin, and I'm assuming the more Bitcoin you hold, the more scary changes get. I've seen arguments for ossification, arguments against it. I'm against it, but what do people what are they misunderstanding?
So first of all, anyone can add any change to the Bitcoin code that they want. The Bitcoin code lives on the internet. All of you can go to it. You could download it. You could change a character, and you would have quote unquote changed Bitcoin. Now, if you would have literally changed the protocol while doing that, Bitcoin would have been dead. We wouldn't be here, right? Someone would have broke it the day after Satoshi launched it. The way protocol changes get adopted is if all of us run the code that was written. Does that make sense? So if Vladimir Putin makes a change to Bitcoin, if I make a change to Bitcoin, what's your name? George. If George makes a change to Bitcoin, it doesn't actually matter unless we run the change. And so developers aren't a threat to the network. The threat to the network is ourselves. If we all adopt a change that accidentally changes the Bitcoin supply from 21 million to 21,000, that's the threat. And so anyone can build whatever they want. And it's impossible for us to gatekeep that. If we want to get in the way of BlackRock of funding developers, what's going to happen when Putin wants to fund developers? You think that guy's going to listen to me or Saylor or Dorsey? Get the fuck out of here, right? So what we want is we want to encourage developers to build whatever they want. That's always been the case. Give them no strings attached funding because developers are the artists of the digital world, right? They are the creators. They're the most forward thinkers in the room. They're the smartest people in the room. And you want to say, here's this open source movement. Do what you think is best. Now, if you build something that's dog shit, well, none of us will run it. This has happened many a time before. If you build something incredible, we'll all adopt it and Bitcoin will get better. Let me tell you guys a quick story on that, and then I'll be quiet. Here's an example of someone building something that's dog shit and we didn't run it, Bitcoin Cash. But here's the thing, Pete, you were there, Danny, you were there, we pleaded Roger, don't do this, don't edit that code, doesn't make any sense. He did it anyway, despite us getting in the way, having private meetings, we just didn't run it, right? The Bitcoin network didn't run it, we ran different code. That version of Bitcoin lives as a different asset, and now it's worth 0. So that's an example of a malicious developer not being a threat to the network. So whether it's Larry Fink or Roger Ver, it doesn't matter. Now, how we got the Lightning Network, there was an upgrade to Bitcoin called SegWit, Segregated Witness. SegWit, this upgrade that happened in 2017, nobody knew technically that it was possible. This is a part of Bitcoin history that nobody remembers. SegWit was required for us to get the Lightning Network, and no one knew how we were going to do it. Every computer scientist, MIT professor, Harvard-educated students couldn't figure out how to get it done. 2 funded open source engineers figured it out. It was a stroke of brilliance. We all had to check the code twice, like, how the hell did you do that? And we went from, are we ever going to get the Lightning Network? Are we ever going to find a new scaling solution to Bitcoin? To having one. And it was really good code, and we all adopted it. But it didn't come from any central planning. Like, that was a stroke of genius from the Bitcoin open source community. And if we didn't have it, I don't know where Bitcoin would be. We would have never gotten that change. So there is no real threat to Bitcoin developers. People build whatever they want. If you want Bitcoin ossified, never update Bitcoin Core. You don't have to. There are people that are running Bitcoin versions from 5 years ago. They don't ever have to update. So I hope that clears things up. And I reached out to Michael and I reached out to Matt. I mean, this is not about anyone in particular. It's just this idea that, we cannot, Bitcoin is an open source project. This needs maintenance. It's not about building new features. It's not about risking a $1 trillion asset class and potentially ruining it. We can never adopt any of the code if we don't want to. So I think it's just a giant misunderstanding.
So Odell's been going pretty hard at Saylor, basically suggesting that he's been encouraging ETFs to not roll any profits into funding development. Do you think that, so in Bitcoin, slay your heroes is a thing, right? Roger is a perfect example of that. Do you think that Saylor is now trying to gatekeep Bitcoin?
No. Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened or if anything happened. From my experience with Michael, he wants Bitcoin to succeed. I also think that all of our lives are so centrally planned. We live in a world where, nation states and central banks and government tries to take the volatility out of our lives. Volatility is very natural, right? Entropy is natural. And so I think, Bitcoin is what a truly free market looks like and feels like. And the fact that people can disagree publicly and be hostile with each other but want the same outcome is very human. And that's okay. So no, I don't. I think Michael wants Bitcoin to succeed. I think Matt wants Bitcoin to succeed. I think Bitcoin will succeed. And these are grown men that are trying to change the world. And I don't know, if I were to ask Michael, do you think that open source project that you want to be valued at $100 trillion should have no developers? I think he would say that sounds ludicrous, right? So I'm not sure that's his opinion either. So I don't know.
Just drama.
Yeah. But it is, but the thing that's pretty important, and I messaged you this as something for us to talk about, is if all of us don't understand these type of fundamental things, because we are the network, all of us. Bitcoin without humans running it and protecting it is just unused software, right? Bitcoin, the code is just words and letters in a particular order that's compiled and run on a computer. But we're the ones running it. So if we don't understand these things and are able to come to consensus and have healthy public discourse, now that's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And so as Bitcoin gets bigger and new entrants come into the network, these type of conversations are super important. And sometimes it's offensive and sometimes it's hostile, but that's what's necessary unless you want to have unelected central planners do that work for you, right? That's the trade-off.
Why are you in Europe, Jack?
Oh, we're launching Strike in Europe. I think people know that. We got Europe. Let me check my phone. My employees will kill me, but I think it's we're all testing it. There's people, maybe some of you in the crowd are buying Bitcoin on Strike with euros right now. But Europe should be about 2 weeks, and then the UK, Strike UK is right after that. So,
all right. So I'm leading to a question with us. You and I first met in Boston, MIT?
Yeah.
In that little back room, did an interview, and you were working on Zap at the time. Now you have Strike. How many countries?
We're in over 70 markets.
All right, so you're a Bitcoiner building a wallet. You're now a Bitcoiner building a global company. How has that changed your perspective on Bitcoin?
I don't know if it's changed it. It certainly enhanced it. I don't know. I mean, just like anything else, seeing something in real life allows you to value it more, experience it more, feel emotions that you were running through repetitions in your head, right? So I think it certainly enhanced it. My time in El Salvador changed my life, right? But I think it'd be unfair to say that I didn't envision nation states adopting Bitcoin someday. The fact that you and I did have that vision was probably a reason we were part of that story. But it certainly enhances it. It makes it real when someone in Ghana downloads your software and sends in a customer support ticket and tells you why they need your shit to get better. So yeah, it enhances it greatly.
But you've been around a long time, and how long has it been out? Because
11 years, my 11th year in Bitcoin.
Yeah, 11 years. Your dad introduced you to Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Dad's awesome.
Yeah.
And in that period, obviously, like, there's been a lot of changes. Bitcoin now is very different to 11 years ago. I've certainly, over the last year or two, started to feel like there is a shift publicly, a shift in media, but there's also still a group that is reticent to accept what's happening with the Bitcoin. We called this session Game Over because I kind of feel like we're entering those final stages where you're starting to look like an idiot if you still fighting against this. We always see you up on CNBC giving a good chat.
Kelly!
From the wardrobe. From the wardrobe. What do you think it is that people are still struggling with getting this? Because they keep fighting this technology, they keep fighting our arguments, and the networks gets bigger and stronger.
I'm not to be honest with you, I don't even know if I have the opinion that there are real struggles with Bitcoin at this point. To me, what you just described is really game over for fiat currency. I view Bitcoin as the best expression of fiat debasement. And so fiat debasement can be best understood and best realized by looking at this Bitcoin thing. But when people struggle with Bitcoin nowadays, I think it's the same way that, someone struggles when they first start a diet. They have a few good days and then they eat a cupcake or whatever, because change is hard and difficult and you have to get acclimated with something new. But I think I'm of the opinion that the gig is near up in fiat. I mean, the fact that Wall Street adopted a Bitcoin ETF to me tells me everything you need to know. Your buddies, the Winklevi, they tried to get that ETF for what? 13 years? 13 years. Daddy Fink comes by and he gets it in 6 months. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that they know what they're doing, and it's the same people that have been fucking up the financial space and rigging the game know the game is rigged and want access to the exit. So I'm not sure anyone disagrees with Bitcoin. Maybe change takes time, but...
Do you have any concerns about BlackRock entering Bitcoin?
No.
You don't think there's any risk that they have so much social clout within Bitcoin that they can push through changes or object to changes that...
Social clout with who? Not me.
But they certainly have a lot of influence, and they will get growing influence, because the people that are buying the BlackRock ETF are not the Bitcoiners in this room, right?
Yeah, listen, like we opened this conversation with, the only way Larry Fink could change Bitcoin is if he updated every one of our computers. That's what makes it resilient to this idea. The other thing that's really important is this is why Bitcoin, one of the reasons Bitcoin doesn't work with something like proof of stake, or proof of stake doesn't work, because it doesn't matter how many Bitcoins Michael Saylor or Larry Fink acquire. That doesn't give them any outsized influence on the protocol. So Larry Fink's gonna have to walk his old ass into my house, change my computer, and then do that 8 billion times over. Get the fuck out of here. So I just don't see it whatsoever. I also, now this is a little bit more speculation, which could be interesting debate. I don't think anyone on this planet now has an opportunity to acquire enough Bitcoins to be a threat. If you owned 85% of the Bitcoin supply, you would theoretically be somewhat of a threat. You can corner the market, right? Because the way Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin in a grounds up way, Satoshi Nakamoto didn't list Bitcoin publicly through Goldman Sachs. Satoshi Nakamoto didn't ring the bell at the NASDAQ. No one had early access to the cap table. Because it was a grounds up movement, Bitcoin is already so well distributed, it'd be impossible. We're seeing Michael Saylor go on the greatest tear in the history of Bitcoin, and he just hit 1%. Satoshi owns, in theory, not even a 20th. It'd be a 20th. It would be impossible for someone to own something like a third of the supply. And so I just don't see it. I don't see it at all. I do think that owning an ETF is not owning spot Bitcoin. I mean, what you want to do is exit the system, in my opinion. I think money is abstracted time and energy, right, at the end of the day. And the world has borrowed a ton of time and energy and not delivered back on it. And so the question that everyone's trying to figure out, that every single government and central bank is trying to figure out, is whose time and energy is going to pay that back. Does that make sense? Like money's abstracted time and energy. Like all of the time and energy you spent, it's an instrument to capture that. The global debt to GDP is 360%. So that's a metric to see how much time and energy people have borrowed from all of you, and they didn't make whole on it. They can't pay that back. But that loss has to be realized somewhere by someone. And so the question that everyone's trying to wrestle with, like we could do a debt jubilee where, the US government just says, we're defaulting. And then the people that would be paying it back are the bondholders, right? So they don't do that because Jamie Dimon owns all the bonds, right? So the theory is that everyone in the room pays it back via inflation. And so to me, buying Bitcoin, in this realm of conversation, buying Bitcoin is exiting it and saying, I understand the debt to GDP is 360%, that there's an insane amount of human time and energy that has been stolen and has to be made whole on. It's not going to be mine. If you're in a financial asset, like an ETF, you're not out. Like they still have access to your time and energy. So I think it's different assets, but I have no problem with people that play fiat games that want to do that. I don't think that's a big deal.
Can we talk about scaling?
Sure.
You obviously have a lot of experience in Lightning. Originally, when you work on Zap, that was a Lightning wallet. There's a lot of challenges with scaling at the moment. There's people putting things on chain that some people believe is garbage. I mean, I think it's garbage. Some people believe it's super important. I think it's bullshit. But whatever reason, we at some point have to solve scaling issues. Lightning has its challenges. You as somebody who's building a company that is built on the Bitcoin network, what is your view on where we're at with scaling Bitcoin at the moment? Because you obviously have to consider a lot.
When I run Strike internally, something I ask my employees to do all the time when they enter a meeting, when they create an objective, is what does success look like? It's incredibly important to understand the finish line before you start the race. Because or else you don't know if you won, if you lost, if you're late, if you're early. And so when it comes to the Lightning Network, it's what does success look like? If the Lightning Network was designed to cure all forms of cancer, yeah, it's not working. If the Lightning Network was an open value transfer standard on the internet, works great. For me, at least, I'd be hard pressed to find someone that says it doesn't. It is a value transfer protocol on the internet that settles in a cash final manner with barely any fees, if any at all. So I don't know. I mean, Bitcoin, again, there is no central planning. So who defines success? I think for many of us, Lightning is a phenomenal tool. Can we build more? Yes, of course. But does that mean it sucks? No. For others, Lightning isn't helpful because, they're curing cancer. They're trying to do something that, at least that wasn't my version of success. So I don't know. Here again, this is why we would want to fund open source developers. Is we want no strings attached funding to devs, because Bitcoin's an open source project. People should be able to do what they want. If it sucks, we won't adopt it. If it's great, we'll adopt it. I think people are going to build a lot of cool things. And I think for what my interpretation of what Lightning was supposed to do, I think it's doing a good job.
I'm going to stay with the inscription stuff at the moment. We recorded a podcast episode with Bitcoin Mechanic. We've also recorded shows with Shinobi and a few other people. And there's this kind of different opinion. My view is Bitcoin is money, that's what I care about. We've all been out to various countries around the world where people have money that isn't as good as ours. And so Bitcoin solving that's super important. Some people have just I just accept. Just accept it. We can't do anything about people putting bullshit on chain. Where someone like Mechanic takes this ultra principled view and says, No, we should, and we can, and we should work against it. What do you think about this?
If I'm being super honest, I view it as a distraction to my time. Again, Bitcoin's this permission system. If some guy is going to spend millions of dollars a day or a week to put JPEG cats on Bitcoin, point him out. I'll go shake his hand. Thank you for helping secure my savings. I have no idea why you would be on pace to spend $250 million a year to secure my net worth. But I appreciate that. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I mean, the incentives are in a place where anyone, no matter who you are, will run out of money unless it's economical. Bitcoin's incentives are built in a way where it has to be economically sane for it to scale. So I log on to Twitter and someone is seemingly wasting money putting JPEGs on the chain. Like, I don't have an opinion. I got work to do. I'm trying to launch Europe. Like, I just find it a bit pointless of a debate. And if it is economical, then in a free market, it's hard for me to not justify that. But I don't think it is.
So you believe that given a long enough time frame, economic transactions on Bitcoin just outspend the nonsense?
Yeah, of course. I mean, do you not believe?
No, I do. I agree.
I was going to say, let's put it this way. If someone spends more than they earn, in theory, they run out of money. If someone earns more than they spend, in theory, they could spend forever. They'll never run out of money. That's how markets work. So that's the free market being the judge of if something's worth it. I went to Harvard.
All right. Sadly, we're coming close to an end. We got 2 minutes 40 to go. A lot of people here, a lot of people come out to see you, to see everyone else, come to Bedford. A lot of people, you would have seen this earlier. Sorry, you should see this, Jack. Hands up if this is your first Bitcoin conference.
Wow. Who are you guys?
They don't let us out of England much.
It's awesome. That's awesome.
But it's really cool. It's really inspirational. A lot of people out here may be thinking, do you know, I want to do something. I want to support Bitcoin. I want to get deeper involved. I don't just want to turn up. You've been involved a long time. Any words of wisdom for everyone here?
Buy some. No, seriously. I mean, it's a network. Networks are defined by the participants, right? Like a network of one is hardly a network at all. So join the network. And, I believe the people that have this attitude of, well, I understand it, and I get it, and I understand why it goes up, and I understand why people are building incredible wealth and avoiding a hidden tax by oppressive governments. But, it just, well, you deserve the worst. Sorry. Be the change you want to see. Nothing will change if you don't change. I have this conversation with my friends all the time. It's like, no, totally, I get it. I get how you're up 10,000% just sitting on your ass. You're the best performing hedge fund in America out of that empty closet. I understand how inflation doesn't affect you. I understand how now you're an overall healthier person and you have a lower time preference. But what if the government tries to It's like, well, then you deserve to be a slave to their decisions. So I would say, join the network. Be the change you want to see. I'd be shocked if the system we're in now is the system my kids grew up in. And for context, I don't have kids. I plan to, hopefully someday. So I think we will be part of change. I don't know what that is, but I'm going to place my vote. You know what I mean? Place a vote. Don't be a bitch.
Sadly, we're at the end. Jack, appreciate you coming over for this, brother.
Yeah, thank
value
you,
our
bro.
friendship. Danny, thanks for your help today with
Thank
everything.
you.
You're the best. That's it, guys. All right.